I struggled with, well, which path to take in my own spiritual life and really general life for a long time. So how many of you, when you're on the interstate, switch lanes? Because you think you're going faster when you switch lanes. Some of you, yeah, that's like a thing, right? So let's think about this for a second, right? You're on the middle lane, and then you feel like, oh, left lane is going faster, so you go into the left lane, and then, oh, wait a minute, right lane is going faster, so let's switch lanes again, right? And so what happens is you zigzag through the interstate. Are you actually going to be faster doing this? Yes and no. Sometimes, maybe. Generally, I would say probably not. And think about, right, Waze, you know, the app Waze that kind of puts us into all these different directions. And sometimes what happens is you miss a turn because they make you go from the right lane and then all the way to the left, but there's so many cars and then you miss it and then you end up somewhere else, and then in the end it takes, again, 10 minutes longer instead of cutting it 5 minutes, right? And besides you maybe not getting to your destination faster switching lanes, what also happens when you do that? Risk, you have higher risk, yes.
It's irritating.
It's irritating, it's stressful, right? It's really stressful going right and left. And so you sit there, you need to constantly check your shoulder, make sure you're not bumping anyone. And so that's rather a stressful kind of driving situation. And so in my personal life, I've actually applied this to different areas of my life too, that I switched path multiple times and staying on one path. Anybody can relate to that? Maybe switching paths, right? So you're like, oh, I'm really getting into Pilates. And then you figure out, no, aerial yoga, that's where it's at. So then you step into aerial yoga. And then you figure, no, kickboxing, that's really where it's at. Right? And so you're exploring a couple of classes here and there, but really you're not really getting into anything in particular. And so that's something that I've experienced. People talk about their spiritual life as well. And people say, you know, there's so many paths, and I'm just going to take my truth from all of them, and then I'm creating my own little path. Or, you know, obviously our wonderful Swami that came last week, Dr. Swami, talked about how we all say we're spiritual but not religious. Don't really know what that really means. And so we kind of going in between all these different paths, and what happens is, because there's so many paths, right, we think that I'm just creating my own truth here. I'm just creating my own custom-made spiritual path. Because after all, in society that we live in today, custom-made, that's where it's at, right? Making things special, just customized for us, makes things somehow more truthful. But is that really true? Right? Is that really so that we always need to custom-made? Because when you think about this spiritually, we're trying to kind of create our own truth. We actually kind of playing God. Right? We're playing God in terms of, I'm just creating my own truth here. And if I'm creating the own truth that then I feel like everybody else should follow, then makes me a pretty powerful-ish, feeling powerful kind of person that thinks I can create the truth. I can figure it all out by myself. It puts also a lot of credence to ourselves, thinking that we're just enormously smart. And sure, we all, smart in some ways, but are we really that smart that we can figure out all by ourselves the truth about why we're here, what this whole planet situation is that's floating around in space, what all these other floating around universes are, and what we're even doing here, right? It's kind of it's a big topic to really think that, we can totally figure this out by ourselves. And however, I felt like I can totally do this by myself too. Because there's just so many different, truths out there, and after all, committing, that's really kind of a scary thing. Anybody feels like has commitment issues in different areas, maybe? Yeah, it's not necessarily relationships, but really, it can be anything, right? Again, Pilates class versus aerial yoga class, right? Or whatever, kickboxing. It's one of those things where, can I really just settle down and just do one thing? And part of the reason of why I think we have a really hard time doing that also is because the nature of this material world really invites for multitasking. It invites for us to do a gazillion things at one time. And it also invites us to be distracted by so many different things all the time. So staying on one path is actually really difficult because it kind of goes against the stream of things that are going on. And so I was kind of thinking about path, and like a path in nature. And I kind of want to invite you to do a little visualization with me, what it actually means when there's a path in nature, okay? So I'm going to guide you through this little visualization here. Close your eyes, keep your eyes open, whatever feels good. But I want you to imagine you are entering into a forest, and there's actually no path created there. You know that there is somewhere some form of goal to attain, and what you do is you have your hands and you are going through the bushes, you're trying to push the branches aside, and then you see something that looks interesting and maybe lead you to your goal, so you make kind of a right turn, but ooh, there's a lot of underbush and there's a lot of roots, and suddenly you kind of stumble, you gotta get yourself up again, you get rid of all the dirt that's on your clothes, you continue your path, but then there's another interesting future shiny object that you see that you feel like you follow, so kind of make a left turn. And again, you were already, thorns were kind of in your skin because you had to really go through the thick bushes. And after a while, you're really exhausted and you need to take a break. Now let that go. Now you're entering that forest again. This time, there's a path. And you're walking on this path, and it feels rather smooth. It goes in one direction. You don't really have a difficult time walking it, because all the roots are already evened out. You're also not really getting dirty, because all the trees and bushes are already cut aside, so you can walk smoothly through it. And after a while, you actually end up at your goal without any form of bodily harm, distraction, or exhaustion. So let's come back to really thinking about what it means to be on a path. You can open your eyes again if you have to close. Right, a path really has amazing attributes. Just this idea of a path in nature. It goes in one direction, so either you can go forward or backward, but you can't really go to the sides. And obviously you can, but then you, again, back in the bushes. So you go either to the front, to the back, or you just stand still. Also, it's much easier to walk on it, right? You can make faster progress because there's, again, not really big trunks you have to climb over, so it's less exhausting. And there seems to be a direction going, the path goes to some form of direction. It gives you a direction, it goes to some form of goal. And so if you just follow that path, you're going to attain a certain goal. It might be you go to the height of the mountain and you have a beautiful view. Right? You can totally stay on this kind of natural level here. But I think we can kind of apply this to picking a path in our spiritual life as well. Right? We kind of have this fear that if I'm picking a path that, well, what if this is, the wrong path? Or I really actually have a hard time just taking one path because there's so many. And so what I noticed in my own life is that I really have commitment issues. I have a hard time committing to one thing because I'm also a control freak. And I really like to be in control and creating my own path. But then thinking about it, is that really smart on my part that I think that I can use my hands and maybe tools and just fight through the thick forest? And I'm thinking of like big jungle here, right? And I'm just going through it with my axe and my machete and I'm just slaying through the woods. That sounds just so exhausting. And then thinking even about, I don't even know where I'm actually going. I don't even know what that goal is supposed to look like. I don't even know what direction to go to. East, west, north, south? I don't really know. So I'm also lost. And so I wonder, isn't it even just easier to just kind of let go of this kind of control issue for a little bit and just try and walking this path for just a little bit, but really committing to it. In my own life, when I went to school for a really long time, because that's what you have to do if you want to get your PhD. And so doing that, I always had this thing of, I'm going to control everything that's going on in this study situation. And so I would make sure I control where I studied, when I studied, when I went to bed, what food I would eat, and then I would make sure that I would pre-make the assignments so that I don't have to freak out when the deadline comes, only to then find out that the professor changed the assignment and I had to do it all over again. So it's kind of this, you're just trying to do it all, trying to really take it in, and trying to also then think, I know better. So at some point, I had to just trust that the professors that I had actually knew what they were doing. Because they were going not only as long to school that I was inspiring to, but they have been doing this job for a really long time. And I just had to surrender to their knowledge and their process. And I figured after a while that, you know what, that actually was not a bad idea, because I actually learned much more than just always fighting against, oh no, I can do this better, or I'm going to figure it out myself. And so in my spiritual life, I kind of was thinking, oh, well, if I just kind of dip my toe into all these different spiritual paths, eventually the water that I dipped my toe in will cover my foot, and then I'll be full of knowledge. But really, that was just a total not true. Because right, it's this assumption that when we dip into all these different little spiritual paths that we think they're out there, that after a while we know everything. And one of the things is also because of the internet, we can just Google everything, and after reading like one entry of what Buddhism is all about, we think like, I know everything about Buddhism. Or we read something about Hinduism and we're like, I'm a Hindu and I know it all, right? And there's so many different things, and we feel like, yeah, I did my research. We say this nowadays, right? I did my research. What does that mean? You were sitting at the couch while watching TV, Googling stuff. That's not research, right? That is not research. And also, what kind of knowledge do you get? You get a breadth of knowledge, but you don't get any knowledge in depth, which means you're kind of staying at the beginning of the path. You know that there are these different paths, but you never walk down on one. And so I actually had to learn as the hard. I know it all, and then my wonderful husband kind of told me, yeah, you're kind of full of it, and you don't know crap. And he never said that. I got it. And he's like, you just got to do it. You just got to commit. Just explore one path. And I was totally freaking out, right? Being the control freak of I can control everything. And then I realized, because I was thinking, well, if I just go for one path, what if that path is actually wrong? What if I'm getting hurt? What if I'm following the wrong person, right? But then I realized if I never actually walk the path, I'm never going to find out if it's the wrong path. Okay? And so I was like, okay, fine. Still just like, okay, I know knowledge-wise I need to do it, but then I still was so scared until I figured out, what does it come down to? Psychology brain comes back. Trust issues. Good old trust issues. Childhood, right? Bonding with your parents situation. Good old Freudian, stuff. Trust. And I just had such a hard time letting go of being the controller and trusting just walking down a path and not just figuring out all myself, right? Imagining that if I just do it all myself, that will be so much better. Why is that so? Right? If they have been people walking down one path over and over again, found one of the same results, why should I not walk down this path? If you want to become a pianist and you want to play the piano professionally, what do? Number one, you commit. You say, I'm going to practice every day, but you're also going to practice not the flute, not the drum, but the piano, right? So you're focusing on one thing and you're actually doing it. Because how are you going to become a concert pianist? You need to practice. You need to do that thing. So how can you become a spiritualist? How can you learn about transcendent matters? You actually have to do that work and focus on that particular practice and not just dabble here and there and kind of think that, I'll create my own little spiritual thing and figure out what the highest truth out there is. I think one of the issues of why we're kind of prone to do that too is this imposter syndrome that we've been taught. Y'all have heard about the imposter syndrome? So imposter syndrome, there's actually this TED Talk by a really cool lady who basically talked about how we just have to fake it till we make it. You've heard about that before? And so imposter syndrome is then this idea that you fake it till you make it, and you imposter that you actually know what you're doing even though you don't. Now, in a lot of areas of life, this can actually be really helpful. Specifically if, you feel kind of not confident and you just kind of like, I'm just going to do it, I'm just going to fake it till I make it. Because at some point, again, you just have to do it, and after a while you realize, oh, I actually, I'm more confident than I thought I would be, or I can be more confident than I thought I should be. But one of the problems is that if we constantly go through life thinking like, oh, I just fake it till I make it, at some point we actually believe that the fake thing that we're portraying is truth. And it's is truth in terms of that we think that we actually know. So it's a differentiation between thinking that I know or knowing that I actually don't know, and therefore being ready to learn. I always ask my students at the beginning of class, do you know anything about XY subject matter? And a lot of them have a really hard time saying no, but I want to hear no. A lot of them come, yeah, I've heard about, social media and stuff. I'm like, yeah, well, great, but what do you really know about it? What does the science say? Have you read about it? Yeah, I read a Psychology Today article. Great, now you know it all, right? And so I asked them, and what I really want to hear is, no, I have no idea. And then I say, that's great, because now I can teach you. So acknowledging that we actually don't know something, and therefore have the humility, that is a big, big requirement for us to actually be able to learn something and walk this path. And that's something, again, I had to also learn the hard way, thinking that, oh, if I just say I don't know something, that means I'm not worthy, or I'm just, people think I'm stupid. It has nothing to do with it. It's just that you're ready to learn. It makes you actually much more of a bigger person than faking it till some person realizes that you're faking it. Okay? It's much better to actually have the real knowledge than to just go through life faking it. And so we can kind of think about also with the path, also we can think about how we can anchor ourselves. As you can see, I really like metaphors, so we're going from the path metaphor to the anchor metaphor. And when we think about an anchor, right, what is the function of an anchor?
To keep you still.
Keep you still, keep you stable, while all sorts of movement is going around you, right? Lots of waves are going on. So you're on a boat, you put the anchor down because you don't want to move around with the currents, right? So already, huge analogy of life, right? So many currents, so many strings pull us. Distraction economy, right? Phones pull us, expectations of parents pull us. Money pulls us. Not necessarily that we love money, but because we need to survive, and we're living in California, and we need money, right? So there's all these things that pull us into different sides. So what if we don't have an anchor that pulls us down? We're going zigzag. The boat is just going crazy, right? Current this way, current that way. And we're never going to go anywhere. We're just totally in control by the material nature, right? And so then we can think, okay, I put my anchor down, but what's the crux here? Crux is where you put your anchor down, right? If you put your anchor in really flat surface level material, right, that doesn't really hold the anchor well, you're gonna drift still. So the idea is that if you just dabble into all these different kind of spiritual paths here and there, you're going to drift. You ultimately are going to drift. So what you need to do is really put your anchor down in one. Like one path. And we can talk obviously about then what does that path look like. But the idea of really just focusing on one path and checking it all out 100%, that will only give you the knowledge that you then can use to determine if that's the right path to be on. And it actually will give you enough depth to realize, wow, all right, this is actually some spiritual path. Like I actually now have learned something about it. I made a commitment. I made some progress. And with kind of walking down the path, right, because we're living in this really fast, distracting attention economy that we're in, we also think that, well, I should just kind of walk for 5 minutes and then there should be the first hooray, right? There should be the beautiful bird on the side I can take a picture for my Instagram for. But when we think about it, right, spiritual knowledge really is the highest knowledge that's out there. It's more than knowledge that I need to do my job as a professor. It's more knowledge than knowing how just this material world functions. It's more than just knowledge about how you can learn different languages or how you can cook or whatever it might be that is on this material planet. It goes much more beyond that, right? It goes into who we are really as something beyond that body. And it goes into where are we coming from and what the source of all of this is. And in order to get there, we have to really walk the path for a while. And we need to be determined. It's not just a 3-mile hike at Griffith Park and we're done. And we have the beautiful view and that's cool. And Instagram it is, right? It actually means to walk more and more and be determined in staying on that one path. So not being distracted by all the little things that are going on the side. And actually in one of the main spiritual texts, the Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 6, actually Krishna talks about the importance of staying focused in one path of yoga and not being swayed by the mind trying to tell you otherwise, or the distractions that are going on and trying to pull you in different ways. And also to just continue walking down the path even though you may not get instant gratification. But what happens is, because we're dealing with a really beloved spirit and source that is all behind of this mess that we're kind of experiencing on a given day, that once we kind of make a serious attempt on this path, we'll get help and we'll get support. And we will feel like we're not alone on this path. So you may start walking down this path through the woods by yourself, but once you've shown some determination and some seriousness that this is really what you want to explore, you actually will get some help. There's a really beautiful story that also is accompanied with that particular verse, where a little sparrow had eggs and laid the eggs really close to shore, and the ocean came and swallowed the eggs. And the sparrow was in misery and wanted to get the eggs back, right? These are the sparrow's kids. And so the sparrow was so determined that it said, all right, I'm going to drain out the ocean beak by beak. So the little sparrow, right, would go into the ocean and just take a little dabble of water, bring it out. Take a little dabble of water, bring it out. And was so determined to drain out the complete ocean so that it would get back to the eggs, which would be laying down at the bottom of the ocean, that would just continue doing that and doing that and doing that. And so this story kind of spread through the area, and other people heard about this determined sparrow. And then the soul of the universe in form of kind of a bigger bird came and wanted to see this determination. And so he looked at the bird and was like, wow, you are really determined and I really appreciate that. So let me help you. And so then the big bird told the ocean, hey, if you don't give up the eggs, I will drain you out myself. And so the ocean was all scared and said, all right, here are the eggs. And so the little sparrow got help once it showed its determination. And so this is something, right, in any form of life, where if we want to accomplish something, we need to put some work in it. That is related to what it means to be on a spiritual path, and just try to commit. Just give it a try. Just kind of let go of the controlling mind and this idea of, what if this is all wrong? And oh, I'm just so scared, and really understand that we all have trust issues and that's okay. But if you never try, you're never going to find out. So with that, I really actually invite you that in the next half an hour when we do this kirtan, to really trust that this is a path that has been walked before, so it's really smooth, and it has a goal. And it actually is a really fun path to walk too. It opens your heart and makes you loving not only toward yourself, but also toward others, toward beings anywhere, toward nature. It makes you feel grounded. It makes you feel so much more enlivened than you could ever imagine. So just trust that that's actually true, because people have experienced that over and over again. And just see that if in the next half an hour you can just let go of your commitment issues and trust issues just a little bit more, and just really embrace the singing, the mantra, the kirtan that we're doing here, and just see what happens.